Where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec back here because you didn't click away. You wouldn't dare, never would, from Real America's Voice. And this is Human Events Daily in Washington, D.C. We're on with Mike Benz. We're talking about these, these questions and these tantalizing questions. A lot, it seems, left on the field with this Ghislaine Maxwell interview. But, as someone who's, done this kind of thing, I would just say, this is a small aperitif to the main course, which would, and potentially a banquet that is yet to come in terms of this. And so Mike Benz was telling us, though, about how these connections, these intel connections that they're talking about actually do come directly with military connections. And it's very interesting how, just looking at this, I keep saying, wait a minute, why are all these arrows pointing at Ukraine?
Right. And as you mentioned, the Clinton Global Initiative, I think the largest individual donor was Victor Pinchuk. And then obviously, as we covered, Epstein and Maxwell go on to help co-found the Clinton Global Initiative. And wrapping up the Epstein part of it, they did ask about the intelligence links. And while we don't have anything on the U.S. side, and again, the CIA and DOJ are still mum, even though Alex Acosta reportedly said that he cut the sweetheart deal because Epstein, quote, belongs to intelligence. And we still don't have the results of a CIA name trace. We still don't have any feedback. Pam Bondi said she'd get back to us about looking into Epstein's intelligence links. No word back yet from Pam Bondi on that, unfortunately. But they did ask about foreign intelligence. And, so they asked about British intelligence and Saudi, and then they asked about Israeli intelligence. And they asked specifically about Mossad, though. And the real story here, Epstein got his start in this really during this highly militarized period in American history in the Middle East, around, even though his clients were Saudi Arabia, Adnan Khashoggi military contractors. That's who he claimed was his client in the 1980s, the most profitable, highest paid weapons dealer in the world, who was a Saudi guy. The whole Iran-Contra and Iran-Iraq war, U.S. involvement was through military sales involving Adnan Khashoggi, Jeffrey Epstein's client, and that was facilitated between the U.S. and Israel. But this was really a military intelligence story more than a kind of political maneuvering Mossad story. So Todd Blanche asks about the Epstein's links with Mossad, and it's unfortunate that he singled out Mossad there rather than Israeli intelligence in general, because she said, not deliberate. I'll read the transcript. He said, did you ever have contact with anyone from Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency? And she says, not deliberately. And then Todd Blanche says, did you ever think Epstein was getting money from Mossad? And Ghislaine said, I wouldn't know. But then in the very next question, he tries to move on and say, are there any other foreign nationals or high society folks or international businessmen or politicians that had a very close relationship with Mr. Epstein that we haven't already talked about? And Ghislaine Maxwell says, off the top of my head, I can think of Ehud Barak. And then Todd Blanche goes on. He doesn't follow that up with anything. He just then asks about Epstein's testosterone replacement therapy. Now, Ehud Barak was the head of Israeli military intelligence from 1983 to 1985, exactly when Jeffrey Epstein was starting off his entire career. Ehud Barak met with Jeffrey Epstein 45 times. They went into business together. They started Carbine, this big military surveillance company. They co-invested in it together. Ehud Barak is probably the most prolific Epstein figure in the story. Ehud Barak was also the prime minister of Israel while Bill Clinton was the was the president of the United States. We know that Jeffrey Epstein made 17 White House visits to Bill Clinton's White House and then helped Bill Clinton found the Clinton Global Initiative. At the same time, Ehud Barak was president, coming from running Amman, Israel's military intelligence. But it's almost like the DOJ didn't know who Ehud Barak was. And Ehud Barak, by the way, is very much an enemy of both the Trump and Netanyahu administrations. Ehud Barak was part of that West exec group, worked closely with Avril Haines and Tony Blinken and that whole crew. They've been trying to revive the Israeli Labor Party as a buffer against the Likud. So there's this kind of international alliance between the Democrats in the United States and Ehud Barak. And the fact that DOJ, she volunteered it. Maxwell volunteered it. And no questions about probably the single most prolific figure in the foreign intelligence side of this. And so I found that to be very frustrating. But obviously, this whole military intelligence side, it's always unclear whether the DOJ is avoiding those questions because they're simply not versed enough in the subject matter expert, or they don't want national security secrets, or they don't want necessarily things on the record that they don't want to get too close to. So that's also, I think, the kind of protective shield that has been over much of Russiagate and the Ukraine affair coming into these past couple months of disclosure out of ODNI and FBI.
Well, I think that's right. And President Trump clearly using this and Tulsi Gabbard with these disclosures on Russiagate to kind of reset the context of all of these conversations to say, look, there never was anything between us. That's all now been litigated. Let's sit down and have this conversation. Look, I was there in Anchorage. People can see with their own two eyes. I saw with my own two eyes that there was this direct relationship, certainly between the president and Putin when they came off the tarmac together, or they met at the tarmac, I should say. But at the same time, when it seemed as though, I'll put it this way, it seemed like the two of them could probably work out a deal together. The problem when it came to the deal of all the Europeans when they got back to Washington, D.C. on Monday for that multilateral meeting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is one of the frustrations from my side of this here is I think Trump has a kind of Reaganite peace through strength philosophy, and I think that Trump's favors for the military-industrial complex by giving so much in Pentagon funding. It's not just the $1 trillion Pentagon budget this year, but remember, even during Trump 1, Trump gave the military its highest budget of all time, even in the first term. This is all while telling the military not to get involved in Syria, not to get involved in nation building. They accused him of being an isolationist while giving the most money to the military ever of any president twice now. And also, Hillary Clinton was on TV last week. She was on live broadcast TV news saying the first thing positive I think she's ever said about Donald Trump in the past 10 years, commending him for getting countries to fulfill their NATO commitments. But NATO is the big blocking point in the Ukraine negotiation. And not only that, NATO is doing a lot of the civilian censorship work that both President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance are campaigning against. And so I understand that the strategy that the admin is pursuing is keeping the coalition together. It keeps the Lindsey Grahams and it keeps the internationalist wing of the Republican Party somewhat loyal because they're getting their cut of the corpse, so to speak. They're getting their cut of the pie. But what you're running into here is that we're beefing up an organization that is on the other side of the negotiating table with us in terms of our own foreign policy. So the analogy I've been giving, it's like giving a dog steroids and then telling it to stay in the house, or like giving a dog amphetamines and telling it to sit still. It's giving it more money than ever.
Or when we give our kids cupcakes and we tell them they're not allowed to run around, or that they have to go straight to bed. No,
it's the marshmallow test. It's like
the marshmallow nose. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're not going to. Mike Benz. Hey, man, I got about a minute left. I know you got to run. Tell people what your coordinates are because there's so much more to come of this. And look, if President Trump wants to drop the hammer, we all know he will.
Yes. Okay. Find me on X at Mike Benz Cyber. My foundation's work is at foundationforfreedomonline.com. You can also find my video archives on Rumble and YouTube.
That's right. And in fact, there was, and just by the way, there was a piece in the Washington Post this last weekend saying that one of Zelensky's advisors saying, look, we are getting a lot more pressure from the White House talking about financial and perhaps even intelligence cessation if they do not agree to this deal. So we will see. Broke that down on War Room. Park it here, folks. We ain't going anywhere, and neither are you. Real Marcus Voice, Human Events Daily continues.